Hi, it's Claudia, and in today's video, I wanted to talk to you about apologizing, and in specific, the 5 apology languages. Up until last April, so that's like April 2019, I had no idea that there was more than one way to apologize. And this has actually caused a lot of problems in my marriage and also in my relationships with other people. And it's probably one of the reasons why I couldn't have any friends, because when someone had offended me in some way, because of the way that I grew up and the unhealthy behaviors of my parents, I ended up thinking that the other person should know when they offended me and they should apologize. But nobody was doing it because I was waiting for specific signs of apology and they weren't giving them to me. So now, of course, I haven't spent the time to make a journal or make notes of who did what. But with my husband, I luckily discovered this amazing book about the 5 apology languages, and it was the first step in saving my marriage. So the book is called When Sorry Isn't Enough, and the authors are Dr. Gary Chapman and Dr. Jennifer Thomas. So last April, I had this huge fight with my husband, and he blurted out, and I got the clear impression that he meant it. He said he wanted a divorce. And I was devastated because I didn't want to get divorced, but also at the same time, I was completely emotionally dependent on him. So the thought of him abandoning me was almost unbearable. So what happened was that we live in a very small apartment, so he went to the bedroom and he stayed there, and I was left on the couch in the living room, and I just felt like this immense void. And usually when I was upset in the past, I wasn't able to eat or to think about anything. I just felt this tremendous pain. So somehow I started reading this book because I believed that my marriage was over and I wanted to know what went wrong. And this was always very hurtful to me, but it was because of my ignorance of other people's behavior and of the 5 apology languages. So I wanted to know why in the world wouldn't anyone take responsibility for their behavior and apologize to me? And why was I the only one in the relationship to do that? So growing up with my parents, it was an abusive environment, and my parents had a lot of unhealthy behaviors, and they would never take responsibility for their behaviors. So whenever I got hurt, and it was normal for me to get hurt in those situations, they would say that there was something wrong with me and I am to blame for their behavior and for getting hurt. Because if I had known better, they wouldn't have had to do the things that they did, and which apparently hurt me, but in either case, I shouldn't have been hurt. So because of this, because I realized that there are just things that are wrong and they are hurtful, and if you do them, you hurt the other person. There is no healthy person who could say, this is okay with me. So because of my parents who never admitted that they did anything wrong, and because I knew that these things were wrong, well, some of the things that they did clearly wrong, I developed this, in Christian terms, it is called an inner vow. So I made a promise to myself as a response to this pain, because it was the pain of the thing that they did, but it was also the pain of them not acknowledging me as a person with feelings and my feelings. I made this promise to myself: whenever I do something wrong, I will be the first to apologize. But the problem with this is that based on this completely unhealthy behavior, then I went in the opposite direction, which is also unhealthy. So I ended up apologizing and saying I was sorry and taking responsibility. And I ended up taking responsibility for things that were not my responsibility. So then this also contributed to having unhealthy friendships, which eventually ended because I wasn't giving 50%. I was actually trying to prove myself that I was a good person, and I was giving about 90%. So there was very little left for the other person, and I couldn't accept help or anything like this. So eventually those relationships ended. So anyway, so I wanted to know why people won't apologize. And that's when I read this book. And I realized, after thinking about it, I realized that actually my husband was apologizing to me. I just didn't know that he was doing it, because there are different ways to offer apologies. So this is like, it was a light bulb moment in my head. So this book has helped me take the first step in my emotional healing, because as I said before this, I ended up in complete dependency with my husband, but also with everyone else. But I had ended all those relationships, so it was just me and him in the end, and my therapist. So I ended up simply reacting to whatever the other person was doing. And because of my complex post-traumatic stress disorder, I was being triggered into, so my brain, instead of assessing normally the situation that was happening right now, my brain was kind of taking me back in order to protect me from the current situation. It was taking me back emotionally to my past when something traumatic did happen, because my brain wanted me to avoid any kind of conflict, because conflict had always ended up in really horrible situations for me. So I realized that my husband had been apologizing in a different language. And then by reading this book, I decided, okay, I am going to take responsibility for my behavior, and I am going to hold myself accountable to my own standard. So if I don't want to yell at my husband, I'm not going to keep saying, you made me yell. I'm going to say, I don't want to yell. Whatever you do, I will not yell. So this is how I broke free from this dependency, because growing up, we all learn to be dependent on other people because, well, it's kind of like how the system is set up, right? Because our parents reward us and they punish us, and the same goes with our teachers. So we end up learning to be dependent on other people's reactions, which then influence our behavior. So by reading this book, I decided, okay, I am going to offer the behavior that I want to offer, whatever the other person does. And then I thought, okay, do I want to be a person who apologizes? Do I want people to apologize to me? Yes. Therefore, I will do that. I want to be the kind of person who apologizes in a healthy way when I do something wrong. Now, this was the first step of the journey. So then I had to dig deeper and find out, like, okay, what is the healthy thing? When do we apologize? And we talked about that a little bit in the last video. So we don't go left and right apologizing, but we have to think about it and be appropriate in our apologies. So don't take responsibility for what other people do, but take responsibility for what we have done. So this book has prompted me in a way to write this apology letter to my husband. And I wrote everything that I could think of that I did wrong, that I didn't want to do, but I had done as a reaction to whatever he did. I took full responsibility for my part, and I went through all the apology languages and I touched on them in the letter. And I made the decision to give him the letter, but as the authors say in the book, I'm going to request that my husband forgives me, and I'm not going to demand that he does it. So one of the apology languages is to ask for forgiveness, but I can't impose my will to be forgiven on the other person. So that was difficult because I did not want to get divorced, but I had to let go. I had to sincerely and honestly and just, I had to let it go. I had to put the future of our relationship and our marriage into my husband's hands. And I did that, and eventually he did forgive me. So here's how I did the letter. So I just sat down and I thought about, okay, because again, I didn't know what was healthy at the time. So I was just like, okay, do I want to yell? No. Do I want to do this? No. Do I want to blame him for my behavior? No. Stuff like this. So then I just wrote it down. So let's take a look at the 5 apology languages. So the first apology language is to say, I am sorry. And this means expressing regret. So here's our 2 quotes from this chapter. So the first one is, expressing regret is the emotional aspect of the apology. It is expressing to the offended person your own sense of guilt, shame, and pain that your behavior has hurt him deeply. And then the other part of this is the other quote, apology is birthed in the womb of regret. We regret the pain we have caused, the disappointment, the inconvenience, the betrayal of trust. Regret focuses on what you did or failed to do and how it affected the other person. The offended one is experiencing painful emotions and they want you to feel some of their pain. They want some evidence that you realize how deeply you have hurt them. For some people, this is the one thing they listen for in an apology. Without the expression of regret, they do not sense that the apology is adequate or sincere. So to me, I am looking for this in an apology. I want to know that the other person, I don't want people to feel bad as a concept, but I want them to acknowledge that they have hurt me in some way, and I want them to feel some kind of remorse, I guess, right? So it's not like we want the other person to hurt, but we want them to acknowledge that this was not okay. This, whatever it is that they did. And so this book is has a bit of a different approach than my approach on forgiveness. So when I read this book for the first time in my life, really, I read it as, what can I do? And I read it from the perspective, I started reading, trying to understand why other people won't apologize to me. But then I realized the only thing that I can do is the behavior that I offer, make that choice. I cannot choose what other people do. And I had already tried this with my husband for 9 years. I kept trying to explain to him, in this situation, this hurts me, please stop doing it. The problem with that is that he is a different person. So he's not going to recognize the situation as I recognize it. So even though he probably tried his best for years, he just couldn't, because his brain is different, because he's a man, but also he's a different person, and he has had different experiences. He has different desires of what to happen in the situation. So he couldn't recognize that, okay, in this situation, I shouldn't do this because it upsets my wife, right? So this is how I stopped. Like, by reading this book, I stopped thinking about what other people do. Although the book a little bit kind of, I think that it ties together forgiveness with reconciliation. And I personally from my experience, I separate the two. So the authors are saying that in order to forgive, the other person has to apologize. But well, I grew up in this environment where if you apologized, you were seen as a stupid person, a weak person, and a doormat. So obviously nobody apologized. And then, of course, this extended to other people in my life because I left Romania. But still, so there, I have not experienced anyone apologizing to anyone. So if I had waited for that, then I would have had to, or if I had, because the book says that we have to go to the other person and say, okay, this hurt me, I need you to apologize or something like this. But if I had done that with my parents, then I would have never gotten the apology because I had done this clumsily in the past. So I didn't get the apology, but instead I got blamed for their behavior. So I approach this a little bit differently. I think, and basically the difference is that the authors say that forgiveness and reconciliation are almost the same thing, or at least they happen simultaneously. And I think that forgiveness is something I have to do on my own, and reconciliation happens when the other person apologizes. And then the author talks about going to the other person and telling them that we were offended. So I categorize this as conviction, which is something that I do after I have forgiven. So the authors say, in order to forgive, they have to apologize. And in order for them to apologize, we might have to go and tell them that they hurt us. But I think we don't need anyone else to forgive. We apologize because this is up to us. We can't force the other person to apologize. But in certain cases, if they really did something wrong, we do care about them, and then we convict them. So we tell them, okay, this is not right. Can you please stop it? So the order is different. So, okay, this is the first, sorry for the little parenthesis. So this is the first apology language, which is saying you're sorry and expressing regret. Okay, so the second apology language is I was wrong, and this means accepting responsibility. So, a quote from the book: mature adults learn to accept responsibility for their behavior, whereas immature adults continue with childish fantasies and tend to blame others for their mistakes. And then we have presented the agree-disagree approach. I agree that I have a right to feel hurt, angry, disappointed, and frustrated, or whatever else I may be feeling. I don't choose my feelings, I simply experience them. On the other hand, I disagree with the idea that because of my feelings, I have the right to hurt someone else with my words or behavior. Then we have the third apology language. How can I make it right? Making restitution. And here's the quote: a genuine apology will be accompanied by a desire to right the wrongs committed, to make amends for the damage done, and to assure the person that you truly care about him or her. Then the fourth apology language is I want to change, genuinely repenting. And this is a word that has a bit of religious, I would say, connotations. It doesn't have to, it just means to turn around or to change one's mind. And this part begins, so this apology language, genuinely repenting, it begins with an expression of intent to change. The second step down the road of repentance is developing a plan for implementing change. The third step down the road of repentance is implementing the plan. And the fifth apology language is, can you find it in your heart to, forgive? Requesting forgiveness. Requesting forgiveness indicates to some that you want to see the relationship fully restored. A second reason that requesting forgiveness is important is that it shows that you realize you have done something wrong. Third, requesting forgiveness shows that you are willing to put the future of the relationship in the hands of the offended person. Okay, so these are the 5 apology languages. And my apology languages, the ones that I would love to receive from other people, are the first 2. And that is expressing regret, so saying I'm sorry for, and then taking responsibility, saying this was wrong. Whatever it was wrong. So I was expecting that my husband say these things to me, but his apology language was actually genuinely repenting. So whenever I said that something hurt me, he would just change his behavior, but he never acknowledged that that was wrong. And in fact, because I have actually contributed to this. So when I was upset, I thought that I had the right to make the other person upset. I didn't realize that that's not how this works. So I thought, okay, I am upset, therefore I can speak to the other person however I want, and I can be rude because I have this right. They have done something to me, and now I can do this. So I was letting my anger control my behavior. And so every time when my husband did something to upset me, I would go to him and I would say, you did this and I don't like it and you don't care about me. And then he would get defensive, of course, because like if you attack someone, then they get defensive. So then he would blame me and he would say, well, you did this or you did the other one. And then I would get defensive, and then we would never resolve those problems. We just kept arguing about it. But that's because I never took the time to observe his behavior. I was just focused on his words. And so he never apologized. So I didn't take the time to think, well, is he still doing it? And the truth was, and this is what this book helped me to realize, is that he would always change his behavior. If he recognized the situation, like for example, we had this argument about he made a joke that I found hurtful, and in the moment I accused him of not caring about me, and then he said, but you did this, so we argued, and he kind of insisted that he should be able to make this kind of jokes, but he never did again. So I think that it's really important for us to acknowledge that other people are different. And as this book says, and this is based on research, so interviews with different people and what they are looking for in apologies. So we are different. And just because we don't realize that someone is apologizing, it doesn't mean that they're not. So this is why I would really love to encourage you to learn more about these 5 apology languages. And as I said, so the book is a little bit about, I think it focuses a little bit on the other person apologizing, but we have no control over what the other person does. So it's like, I think I have like a more straightforward approach to this. So first I forgive, then I apologize for what I did, and then I convict the other person. So I tell them, I think this was wrong, and I would like if you stop doing it, or something like this. But the author says we don't forgive, the authors. So we don't forgive, we go to the other person. If they apologize, then we forgive. So once they apologize, then we forgive, I think. And then I think we choose to reconcile or not, depending on the offense, I guess. But if they don't apologize, then we release the anger and release them to God. So this is a little bit like, I actually checked the dictionary definition of forgiveness. And in the dictionary, it says this. So eventually we do forgive, whether they apologize or not. But because of this iniquity that I learned from my parents, so iniquity is when I end up doing the same thing that they did, and the other one that I spoke about earlier, that's an inner vow, that's doing the opposite thing. So the iniquity for me was I learned to be a grudge holder. I learned to wait for people to apologize until I forgave them and we moved on. So I just kept dragging with myself feelings of unforgiveness, of bitterness, of anger, of resentment. I just took them with me until they apologized. And that was the thing that actually, I could say, almost destroyed my whole life. I mean, like, it actually did. I had hit rock bottom because of this. So then when I chose to forgive independently of my parents' apology, and release them to God and say, okay, I do not want them to be punished. I want to be done with this, and if I will pay the price. Today, if I saw them in front of me, I would not bring up the past. I would not need them to apologize or do anything. Now, this is different from reconciliation. So if my parents wanted to have a relationship with me, then they would have to apologize. Because if they didn't, then that would be unhealthy, because then I would have to lie and pretend with them that they never did those things that they did. So that would be by default unhealthy. So this is maybe a little difficult. It's just the steps are the same. So the steps that I have done in my life are the same as the steps that the authors of this book are suggesting, but I have had to do them in a different order because I didn't have access to someone who would apologize. On the contrary. So I hope that this video was helpful to you. Maybe it was a little heavy on the side with the order and everything, but this is not the last video that we're going to talk about all these things. So thank you so much for watching, and I do hope, sorry, I forgot to say this, that the action steps, right? So I just wanted to make clear that the action steps are to learn more about the apology languages. This is what I want to encourage you to do, because maybe you are missing out on people who do care about you and they're just showing it in a different way. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video, and there we're going to talk about forgiving ourselves. Thank you so much. Bye.